Welcome back to you, Manny. This evening we're discussing healthcare with Clayton Samsudin. And if you'd like to email me, you can send your inquiries through to info@anchorcapital.co.za or info@phca.co.za. So let's just talk about, we're not even talking about the individual and how the individual gets service. I mean, most of the individuals may be attached to a broker, but I'm not sure the broker has the ability to spend that amount of time for the short-term return or a benefit that they get. They don't get a lot of money on an individual policy. But do you think that employers are taking healthcare seriously enough?
Well, I think what's brought the healthcare issue overall to the fore is that mental health has become very topical these days. And so we've seen that medical schemes have made specific benefits available on the mental health side. And so there's this drive from, I would say, an employee wellness point of view, a mental health point of view, and that's bringing healthcare to the forefront. It's almost like during the time of COVID. But as I've mentioned in the previous segment, I still don't believe that the proper process is being followed to develop an appropriate healthcare strategy, be it for an employer or its employees or an individual. So healthcare strategy, I mean packaging the healthcare products and not relying on a single product. I also don't see so why would the other medical schemes exist, for argument's sake? We understand that Discovery's got the majority of the market, but why would the others exist? It means there is a need for those products, but you can't have, I would say, where you've got a number of members on a particular employer group and they all belong to one scheme. One has to ascertain, and I'm 100% certain, because I found this when we done collective needs analysis, that there are options of other medical schemes that is more appropriate than the single scheme structure.
Clayton, talk about what percentage of clients upgrade? And isn't often an upgrade really a selection against the medical aid? Because do people just normally upgrade, or do they upgrade when their health deteriorates?
No, so upgrades happens very seldomly, and we'll see an upgrade when, let's say, there's a plan for a pregnancy, or the member knows I need this procedure next year. And you're right, it's kind of anti-selective because they'll drop off back again to the option they were on the following year. Or in an instance where the individual or the member is currently on treatment, but the medical scheme is not covering it. So they know, okay, I'm going to make it until next year, and then I'll go to a more comprehensive option. But when I've got the treatment I need, in most cases, they downgrade again.
Well, let's just deal with a couple of emails that have come in, because it's such an important thing, this whole healthcare. We've got an anonymous caller from Llandudno, lovely part of the world. I've been unwell for the past 3 months and in and out of hospital. Each time I submit a claim to Discovery, I receive a notification that it has not been paid. I'm at breaking point. What do you suggest I do, and how can I go about resolving this? Is there someone I can speak to who can go through all my claims with me?
So again, you need to have appointed an accredited healthcare broker. That particular advisor, it's there where they play the biggest role, not just from the advisory part in terms of what is the most appropriate option. But in this case, we have a scenario where the broker should obtain the claims transaction history for that period, understand why are these things being rejected. It could be that there must be an intervention with the provider using incorrect codes. By virtue of the in and out of hospital, let's just say it was a prescribed minimum benefit, it should be paid in full by the scheme. And so that investigation, I think, is important. So this is not something the member can do on their own. Judging by being in and out of the hospital, the member's ill. So it's dependent, on the healthcare advisor to support them through that process.
Okay. Then Jerry in Saxonwell says, what should I do if I'm informed that the medical scheme I belong to has been placed under curatorship? Am I allowed to switch to another scheme without having to face waiting periods or exclusions? Let me just add to that.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the smaller schemes for starters, who are not attracting younger members and have limited members, isn't that in itself a problem? I'm not saying there's a problem. There's this particular member, I'm not sure which medical aid they're talking about, but just the question about it, how do these schemes survive?
Well, we're going to go back, Brian, to the regulator. The regulator is the watchdog and has the responsibility to manage the solvency, amongst other things, of medical schemes. That's why they require financial reports to be submitted and so forth. So it means that, if the regulator sees, in my opinion, that a scheme is below solvency and it's deteriorating time after time after time, that scheme should, they should encourage and enforce that scheme to find another home before it's too late. So we find cases where it's too late, and of course no other medical scheme wants to touch the scheme that's under curatorship. When that happens, then unfortunately
So you're saying that's when a scheme goes into curatorship?
Yes. So what I'm saying is curatorship could be done earlier to avoid a scenario where members can't move, or rather move with the waiting periods and the late joiner penalty.
And this particular individuals who sent the email through, tell me, can they leave the medical aid they're on and move to another medical aid without pre-existing waiting periods and exclusions?
So there are interchangeability rules. So if the individual has been on a medical scheme for longer than 2 years and moves within 90 days and have had cover...
What do you mean moved within 90 days?
So you must move, or rather join the new scheme within 90 days.
Of what?
Of leaving the scheme that's under curatorship.
Yes.
So it's got to almost be...
There's no break. No one's going to take a break, okay?
Yeah. So if that happens, then of course underwriting is different to when an individual would join. And then the late joiner penalties, if the member had membership with that scheme, or then schemes prior to that from age 35, a late joiner penalty won't be applied.
Below 35, yeah.
Over 35, yeah.
Over 35.
Yeah.
So this individual could move.
Yes.
And if he's been there for longer than 2 years, will not have exclusions.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Then Larry in Westler says, preventative care is often highlighted as essential, but remains underemphasized in practice. What strategies or niches could promote a stronger focus on prevention instead of treatment?
Right, so I think we get to a behavioral scenario, so you can have all of those benefits available, and I will say they're comprehensive, the wellness and screening benefits are comprehensive, but trying to get the member to participate and change the behavior. So, you and I, for argument's sake, we'd go to the doctor, GP, our specialist regularly, and we'll do our checkups, etc., but that's kind of waned during the years. And so it's almost the reactive approach now. So we see people only go when something is happening. And a very few, small minority does this every year. So again, let's get back to the employer. If the employer drives the wellness strategy, for argument's sake, host wellness days, but it doesn't stop there. If you've identified certain prevailing conditions within the employer group, then what is the plan thereafter? Imagine I come to you and I report to you that, let's just say 30% of your employees have hypertension, and we just do nothing about it. That's I think we're wasting everyone's time if there's no kind of, let's say, an awareness, an education, participation program thereafter.
I remember when I first started in the industry in the 60s and sold life insurance, and whenever I submitted an application form and that said that the individual had been to a doctor, yes, for a checkup.
Yeah.
The underwriter never believed it, because he said, no one goes for checkups. They go for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think it's got to be encouraged. Will the medical aids pay for your yearly, if you go yearly to a cardiologist and pulmonologist?
Not just in general. So they've got specific screening benefits that they pay for, and it's extended to a degree. And then you have some of the biggest schemes that's got really well-developed programs, that help members that are, let's say, that's got higher than usual diabetes issues, or, as you've mentioned, cardio care. They've got disease management programs for those members, not just a chronic management program. So there are levels of what members can access, but it's comprehensive in cases.
Clayton, I'll mention for our viewing public very simply what happened. I needed extra points to retain my status with Discovery. So I noticed that mammogram is something. I sent my wife to a mammogram, and she went with a friend.
Yeah.
And she had the mammogram. And while the friend was sitting there, some nurse said to her, when's the last time you had a mammogram? And she said, oh, maybe 10 years ago. She said, well, I've got a spot now. Let's have one.
Yeah.
Both of them walked out with breast cancer.
Wow.
Both of them. I've never heard of that before. Both of them have been cured. So what you're saying is you get that early, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Then Basil in Glen Hazel says, how are medical schemes managing the cost of chronic medication, particularly non-formulary medication?
So, Brian, every year what happens is medical schemes review what medicines are on the chronic formulary. And so, again, the big thing now during October, November is not just to review benefits and contributions, but also what has changed in the chronic formulary. So what they do is they, of course, do negotiations with pharmaceutical companies, decide where they get the best price, and that becomes medicines on the formulary. And that's what they'll pay for in full. Now, medicines that's not on the formulary or ethical drugs, as an example, would carry a co-payment, and that's where members have that out-of-pocket experience. So the way to resolve this is to get the chronic disease management list from the medical scheme that contains the formulary, share that with your specialist and your GP, and if possible, select medicines from that list to avoid a co-payment, and that's the best way out of that.
You know, normally with tax, and we saw in the budget this year, we didn't get bracket creep. So people paid the same tax, but everyone's earning a little bit more, so they paid more tax. Are co-payments creeping up as well?
Yes. Co-payments, deductibles, sublimits, and that's a great question, because when that happens, there's a transfer of risk. So what you're referring to, it's a risk benefit, and it's now being transferred to the gap cover. And an ideal case scenario, you'll see Turnberry's increase, as I've mentioned, is higher than the medical scheme, because it has to absorb more of that transfer of risk from the co-payments and the deductibles.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I've got so many more emails, Clayton, which I'll give you, and I'm sure you'll communicate with the people. Many people are skeptical, uncertain about the need for gap cover. Knowledge is power, and I recommend discussing this with your healthcare or financial broker to better understand the benefits. Keep in mind, however, that gap cover options vary. A family policy costing 900 per month offers different benefits compared to one at 400 Rand. Make sure you understand the differences, because not all gap covers policies are the same. Clayton, thank you for joining me this evening.
My pleasure, sir.
It's important to note that our program is to provide information and should not be construed as advice. Next week's program will focus on short-term insurance, and if you need to get hold of me, my details appear on the screen. Thank you for watching, and good night.